So your black or death metal vocals sound a bit weak and thin and like not part of the mix. It is probably your compression settings, but not to worry, I got you covered. Watch this entire video because I'm going to explain why we do compression, how compression works, some EQ moves you might want to make before compression, and then I'm going to show you an exact session of my compression settings. So why do we need to compress vocals? Well, in extreme metal and death metal and black metal specifically, we need that aggressive in-your-face sound. You know, we're not really doing that sensual whisper in her ear down by the fire type of style of music, although for some girls, black metal will probably work the same. Either way, extreme vocals are still dynamic and they still need to be controlled. Every scream and growl or clean singing vocal has variations in volume, and we need to kind of like pin that, especially in a dense metal mix. So as we move forward in the video here, there are three main goals of compression to keep in mind. The first goal is we want to help even out volume inconsistencies. We would then want to bring out details in the voice, and then help keep vocals intense in an extreme metal mix. In short, vocal compression is all about trying to shape and control the vocal chaos, as it were, in a metal mix. Now, there is a common question that a lot of people ask, like, hey, should I EQ before compression? And every forum or every video you're going to go to, people are going to be like, well, you know, it really depends on the mix, or there are no rules, brah. My personal opinion is it really doesn't make a lot of sense to take a vocal that might have some extra honkiness or room sounds in it, or low mid range or low mid buildup, and then smash that through a compressor. It's like the same token, like why would you just smash everything through a mastering limiter and then be confused why all the low end that's out of control is making the mastering limiter, you know, work incorrectly for the entirety of the mix. So for me, it makes a lot more sense to do what I need to do, maybe to clean up the vocal or shape it a little bit with EQ and then run it into a compressor. Now real quick, it might look something like this. We might want to remove rumble from 100 Hz and below, even up as far as 120 Hz, depending on how deep or the type of style of voice. You're definitely going to check out the low mid area for rumble and boxiness between 300 and 500 Hz. You may even run into stuffy sounds or closet sounds, especially if there's a bunch of room echo in the vocal around 1K to 2K. Depending on the position of the microphone and how the person was singing into it, there may be nasal sounds around 4K, and you can already start addressing sibilance around 6K. Now keep in mind that not all vocals are going to need to be adjusted in all these areas. It really depends on the type of vocal that you have. I'm just giving you areas to check out first quickly to see if those are areas that you can clean before running it through a compressor. Aha, yeah, you skipped to this part of the video, didn't you? You're like, let me just go to the part of the video where I copy settings and I'll be good to go. Well, nope, and I really can't blame you because I know that's been kind of the way YouTube works the last couple of years. Just go to the video, go to the part where the settings are, copy, paste, done. What I really want to do in this video is help you understand how compression works and why you're actually doing it and how it affects the vocal. So instead of arbitrary settings that you're going to copy and, you know, get frustrated with anyway, let's talk about what these settings actually do. In this video, I'm using the AK476 and the L2 Aura from Aurora DSP. Dan wanted me to check out some of his mixing plugins. I mentioned to you guys a couple videos back we'd be seeing more from Dan. So big props to Dan for sponsoring the video. And instead of just doing a video going, yep, it's an 1176 style plugin, or yep, it's an LA2A style plugin, I thought I would just use the plugins and show you guys how you can use them. So again, thanks Dan for sponsoring the video. So let's get back talking about compression. Let's look at some things that are generally true for vocal compression, okay? Typically, you'll have a moderate to fast attack, anywhere from 10 milliseconds to 30 milliseconds. A setting in this area maintains the punch of your vocal. If you have an overly punchy vocal, you can experiment with the attack settings to reduce the punch or exaggerate the punch. You're usually going to set up a relatively fast release here, 50 milliseconds to 100 milliseconds to get out of the way of the vocal. And it's really how you're going to control the dynamics of the vocal. You can change the release to push the vocals down for sustains, for example, or reduce the release so that the sustains kind of pop up However, be careful because if you set the wrong release here, you can get somewhat of a bouncing effect. So use your ears here. You're typically going to use a 4:1 or 8:1 ratio in metal. We're talking about metal here, guys. We're not talking about, again, whispering in your ear pop vocals where you might do a 1:5 or 2:1 ratio. This is metal. We need them in your face and aggressive. The ratio is obviously going to tame peaks and keep your vocal performance up front, which is exactly what we're going for. And you're probably going to do around 6 to 12 dB reduction depending on how you decide to compress your vocals. Now this reduction and the compression is obviously what's going to help thicken up your vocals, bringing them up into the forefront of the mix and make them sound aggressive and exciting. Now, of course, again, these are general guidelines. It's pretty much impossible to make a video like this and try to account for every infinite situation that you're going to run into. At the end of the day, guys, you're just going to have to practice this and practice compressing vocals a lot. However, if push came to shove and you are going to be pissed off if I don't give you compression settings, I could probably recommend Joel Wanasek's starting settings, which would be 4:1 ratio, 30 millisecond attack, 50 millisecond release. It's like super basic settings that you can adjust to make sound good for your vocals. All that being said, if after watching this video you want a deep dive on compression, I wrote an exhaustive PDF file for my mixing metal workshop that you can find on my website. Link for that is down below. Now, the last caveat that I need to make here, I know we're doing a lot of talking, but I told you I'm actually going to make this a useful video, not just send you off on your way with some useless settings. The very last caveat that I need to make here, and it's excruciatingly important, okay, is compression will not magically make you sound like somebody else. Okay, if you think Corpse Grinder sounds good because Rutan is dumping a bunch of distortion and saturation on his vocal, you're mistaken. Corpse Grinder sounds like that because that's how Corpse Grinder sounds. So you need to understand that when you are compressing your vocals, the goal is obviously try to thicken them up a little bit, bring them up front into the mix, exciting, aggressive, all those things. But if you just don't have great vocals, you're stuck with what you got, okay? You're not going to take some kid doing inhale screams and make them sound like Corpse Grinder. It's probably not going to happen, okay? So that caveat out of the way, manage your expectations of what compression is going to do for your vocal. It'll compress them. It'll bring them up in front of the mix. It'll make them louder and maybe slightly thicker, but you are just going to accentuate the style of vocals that you have. You cannot turn them into something else. So let me show you what a compressor is actually doing to your vocal. Now, this is about any audio source, but this is a great visualization without having sound for you to be distracted from, okay? This is a visualizer. We just have threshold here at 0. This is all the way fast attack. This is slow attack. This is slow release. This is fast release. Remember, attack is just how fast the compressor is going to start working. Release is how fast the compressor is going to stop working, go back down to 0, okay? And threshold, I think we all can understand that, all right? Up here on top, we can see the reduced signal. The blue here is the new signal, and the green is the original signal, all right? So if we have an 8:1 ratio, and we start bringing it down here, you know, look at what's happening to the blue signal. I want you to keep this in mind. So the reason you might have generally fast attack, if we look at the transient here of a vocal, how much you adjust the attack here has a lot of leeway of what your transient is going to sound like. So medium to fast attack might look something like this. All right, and you notice how it's coming in just after the transient really begins. So medium to fast attack may look like this. Now, medium to fast release, watch what happens to this middle section here, which would be the sustain of a vocal, for example. Watch the release. Look what happens. The longer the release, the more we're pushing down on the sustain of the vocal. This is true for anything that you're trying to compress. But this visualization is the best way that I found to teach this when I work with one-on-one students through my metal mixing tutor and things like this. Look at the release. Remember, the green is the original audio source. The blue is the affected source. And the red up here, you can see what the compression is actually doing. So you have a 4:1, moderately fast attack. All right, we're clamping down on the transient just a little bit. Moderately fast release. We're ducking the sustain a little bit. and we're kind of bringing everything together a little bit. So if you were to do a stupid fast release and a stupid fast attack, you're not doing a whole lot to the vocal, okay? So what we're trying to do when we find these settings is we're trying to maintain punchiness of the vocal and to maintain the body of the vocal through the release settings, all right? And then the threshold is going to determine how much we're clamping down on the vocal, okay? If we do ridiculous compression setting here, this might look like 15 dB, I have no idea, but we're pretty much just killing the vocal here. We have a super pronounced attack, all right? It's insane. So if we bring the attack down to be really, really fast and then make the release really, really long, we're gonna get this whoop, kind of like this bouncing style in the compression. But anyway, I just want to visually represent to you what we're trying to do with the vocal so that you can put this all together. So here we are in the session. I am demonstrating using the Berserkir session. This used to be part of my Mixing Extreme Metal course, which I retired a few months ago. It's no longer able for purchase. However, the multi-tracks are on my website if you want to download them and practice mixing. Just remember, if you have Mixing Extreme Metal, you already have the multi-tracks. If you don't have Mixing Extreme Metal, the multi-tracks are on the website. Hopefully that's clear. All right. So let's go through what I had to do. Here is an example of what this sounds like. Okay. What I'm going to show you here is called two-stage compression or multiple stage compression. The reason I do multiple stage compression is, in my point of view, it makes more sense to have two compressors doing a little bit of the work in tandem to get the result instead of trying to get one compressor to do all of the work. I've never really found that to work for me. Usually I get like pumping or it's not natural. I just don't like it. I like having multiple stages of compression. I have more control and it just works better for me. So let's look at the lows here before I forget. Let's turn all the effects off because that'll be distracting. All right, so here we are.
In the dawn, the mist rises, revealing looming death like distant hills.
The vocals are done by Tim Wilson. He's actually the bass player in Massacre right now. I believe they're down in New Zealand on tour and they're going to go to Australia. Tim's a great friend of mine, been friends for over 20 years, good dude. So he recorded these vocals for me many years ago for this song, and that's how Tim sounds. So if I take all of the processing off of here.
In the dawn, the mist rises.
Tim just has a killer voice, all right? So there's no distortion or anything added on here. Now, if we listen closely here, there's a couple of steps I needed to take before the compression went in. And the first thing is that because Tim kind of just recorded it in his bedroom, we're getting some early reflections bounced back into the microphone that we can hear when he is doing his vocal.
Revealing looming death like distant hills. Bloodthirsty horde.
So it's just there in the back, when he starts singing and when the phrases end. Not a typical situation, but it does happen sometimes. I've really found nothing better than Clarity VX from Waves, one of the few Waves plugins that I still use. It just helps de-reverb the vocal a little bit. Not necessary, but I find that it helps clean things up. The main thing that we really want to pay attention to here is the EQ that I've done. And I'm pretty much doing EQ in the exact spots that I just talked about earlier. We have mid-range build-up. I'm taking the low end out of here. We've got a nasal honk sound, a little bit of a higher honk, and then we have sibilance. I'm starting to do some de-essing a little bit with the EQ. And then because all of these EQ moves kind of deaden the voice a little bit, have a high shelf boost.
Revealing looming death like distant hills. Bloodthirsty horde of the Northmen. The raven butterflies are arbiter of your doom.
Let's find a part where he's singing a bit more. Might be easier to listen. Here's with the EQ off first, and then I'll turn it on.
In their eyes the rage shall burns. The fear of death stays in their soul. No pain can break the spirit.
That's a pretty nasty frequency right there, just this nasally, honky frequency. And so it won't make much sense to put this vocal performance into a compressor, because a compressor is just going to make all that sound worse, because it'll be exaggerated. So these are just the EQ moves that I did to clean up the vocal.
In their eyes the Rachel burns. No fear of disgrace in their soul. No pain.
So yes, it is thinned out a little bit, but it's much more clear, and it's going to be a cleaner signal going into the compressor, and so the compressor will just work better. All right. So now let's bring out the old AK-476. Now, a couple things to note about the 476. With the attack and the release, higher number faster, lower number slower. It's literally the opposite of most compressor plugins, but it's logical if you were wanting to think about that. So 7 fast, 1 slow. Okay? All right. So let's look at what we're doing here. I set this up basically to keep Tim's punch and then the thickness of the vocal, but I didn't, because this is a great example that I can show you. Actually, I'll turn off the clarity to help make this more obvious. Because Tim's in the room, right? If you have a very fast release, we're going to bring up the room sound in the vocal. And that's not what we're trying to do here. We don't want to bring all that extra ambience into the mix per se. I'm going to use reverb and delay for that. So I can show that to you right here. So the interesting thing here is because now I turn this off, I can set the release super fast, and you can hear the room sound come in instantly, because remember, the compressor is releasing quickly. So all of that room sound is going to come in now. Listen.
In their eyes the Rachel burns. No fear of disgrace in their soul.
It sounds like I have a reverb on this, and I don't. I obviously don't want this. I don't want the room sound to come in so fast, or really at all. So I adjusted the release time here just to kind of keep that under control, but still, you know, the compressor is still working even when he's sustaining.
In their eyes the Rachel burns. No fear of disgrace in their soul. No pain can break the spirit of the warrior.
And I'm just kind of looking at the meter here, kind of riding around -5 to -6 dB on a consistent level. Again, it really has to be said that Tim is a really good vocalist and he knows how to record himself, so I'm not running into this problem. If you have this with a ton of peaks and stuff, it might even be a good idea to do clip automation to try and even that out, or do normalization or something to try to get the vocals more even for the compressor. Now for the attack, it's quite similar. Remember what I showed you with that visualizer? We're just setting the attack to where it's just coming in maybe a hair after the transient. So it's pretty fast, as I showed you.
In their eyes the Rachel burns. No
So if we listen to the burn here.
Rachel burns. No Rachel burns. Rachel burns.
We're getting a bit of a pff, and you can already start to deal with plosives a little bit by reducing how fast the attack is.
Rachel burns. Rachel burns.
See, we're cutting the edge off the pff a little bit, and that's why you generally are going to do a medium to fast attack. On the 1176, you're pretty much, if you set it at 5, you're pretty much fine. 5.5 and you're pretty good to go. Even with the distressor, it's very similar to that as well. And then you're looking at doing about -5 to -6 dB, and that's pretty much the extent of setting up the compressor here.
Rachel burns. No fear of disgrace in their soul. No pain can break the spirit of the warrior.
There's a little bit of thickening going on here. Obviously, we're kind of making it a bit louder. But again, I must stress that that's what Tim sounds like when he does vocals, okay? There's no distortion or anything being added here on top of this. Now, I'm doing the 1-2 punch here, the 1176 into the LA2A. This is a very popular technique. I haven't invented it. Just copied it off somebody else and made it my own. Now, the interesting thing with the LA2A is you can add gain to this, which is where a bit of saturation and distortion can be introduced if you want that, with even more peak reduction here, as you can see. So adding in the LA2A will sound like this.
Rachel burns. No fear of disgrace in their soul. No pain can break the spirit of the warrior.
I don't know know if you noticed that, but when I brought the the L2 Aura in here, the vocal is thickening up just a little bit more. However, because we're doing more compression and we're turning it up, the room sound in Tim's vocal is coming up again. So once I turn this clarity EQ back on, listen to the difference. So I'll play it again without the reverb, de-reverb plugging in, and listen.
Shell burns. No fear of disgrace in their soul. No
You can really hear it in that phrase. So let me turn this back on.
shell burns. No fear of disgrace in their soul. No pain can break the spirit.
Significantly more cleaned up, okay? Now with the LA2A, the L2 Aura, it's just what it is, okay? It's very simple. How loud you want it with gain and how much peak reduction you want to do. There's no attack or release to set up here. It's just like a finishing style compressor. It can even be a limiter here if you so choose it to be. All right. What I'm doing here again is adjusting the peak reduction so that it's about 5 to 6 dB reduction, and then basically when the mix is playing, I adjust the gain knob to kind of turn it up or down. This is acting already as one of my first faders for balancing. All right. Let me show you what this sounds like.
Shell burns. No fear of disgrace in their soul. No pain can break the spirit of the warrior.
So you can really pin a vocal down. You can just turn it into a brick if you really want to do that. You're going to lose some of the dynamicism of the vocal. You don't want this bouncing aspect of it, but if you want to pin them, you can pin them if you want. I personally don't do that. And then I adjust the gain.
Shell burns. No fear of disgrace in their soul. No pain can break the spirit.
And that's just bringing it up into the mix a little bit, adding a bit of color, which is really what the second compressor is meant to do. The first compressor, you're starting to control the dynamics of it, what I'm doing with the 476 here. And then the L2 Aura here is I'm finishing it, adding a little bit of color and character to it. And then I'm using the gain knob here as the initial setting for volume in the mix. All right. And then after this, obviously, you'd want to do some de-essing, whatever plugin you want to use for that. Now, that's one style of vocal here that Tim has done. These are the lows. Now we have mids. Now, Tim is pretty consistent with his performance. The mids are just a little bit of a higher register. They sound like this.
No pain can break the...
I'll turn the effects off. Sorry about that.
No pain can break the spirit
You can really hear they're not plosives yet, but they're pretty damn close. You can really hear the sp.
break the spirit.
Okay. So this is where you can start to do a bit more settings with the attacks and release here.
Break the spirit. Break the spirit.
Fast release.
Break the spirit.
Slow release.
Break the spirit.
So the slow release, it's not really doing much on the first because we're just starting here. Let's do this.
No pain can break the spirit.
You can hear when we're looking at the full section now that because the compressor's moving more slowly and it's not opening and closing as fast, it's clamping on the transients of the words that are starting after the previous word. So it's not fully finished compressing the previous word. So that's how you can kind of start to control very hard plosives or hard syllables. It's not a big deal for me. I'm not too concerned about this. Let's go back to 5. This is where I had this.
No pain can break the spirit.
Sounds pretty cool to me. Nice and punchy. So I'm just accentuating the punch a little bit. It's the exact same thing. But when you go to each tracks like this, the performance matters. If you have a lot of low growling versus higher screaming, again, you'll need to check out the attack and release settings, but it's not going to be a drastic difference. You're still kind of looking more or less to medium fast release for medium fast settings for attack and release with your vocals. It's kind of just a consistent theme. Same thing with the L2 here. Again,
No pain can break the spirit.
just leveling it up a little bit, adding a bit more gain. And then it's literally the same thing. So both of them together.
No pain can break the spirit of the warrior.
And that's just how Tim sounds. He's a beast. Alright, and that's pretty much compressing vocals. Maybe you're a bit disappointed after watching this video because you realize there's really not that much to it. A lot of it comes down to ear training. If you didn't hear the difference in the compression, it just means you need to practice hearing compression more. It's totally normal, it just takes some time. That said, however, compression is vital in a metal mix, getting vocals up front and in your face to sound exciting and aggressive. That doesn't mean, however, that you can't do creative things with compression if you want to. There's nothing stopping you from smashing vocals if you want, layering vocals, smashing the piss out of them, adding distortion. You can do all these things. That's a creative decision that you can make for your own song. The point of this video that I wanted to show you is just how the compression works on vocals and what you might want to do, what the goals are, and what it should sound like. Now, like I said in the video, I'm a big fan of the 1-2 punch with the 1176 into an LA style plugin. I think the Aurora DSP plugins are great. I enjoyed using them. The best part is they're super affordable. So if you want to do that 1-2 punch combo, the AK476 and the L2 Aura, these are two plugins that are super affordable that allow you to do that particular style of compression. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. And if there is a topic that you would like me to cover about mixing metal, leave that down below. Anyway, guys, I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.